This is Revenge Bible. I didn't expect a single sentence to rearrange the architecture of my heart, but there I was, standing in the cold glow of the city's winter lights, clutching 2 VIP tickets that suddenly felt heavier than my own bones, when Ryan looked at me and said, almost casually, "You're not that important, Chloe. You think too much of yourself." Funny how a voice can sound both bored and destructive at the same time. The street behind him hummed with life, cars, laughter, the soft chorus of holiday music drifting from the theater doors. But inside me, there was only silence. A kind of silence that feels like the world stepping away from you, letting you fall without a warning. My name is Chloe Hart. I'm 27, and I work a modest customer service job that requires patience, gentle tone, and a smile that sometimes feels like it belongs to someone else. I bought those VIP tickets for his favorite musical, thinking it would be a night of warmth, connection, maybe even a moment that stitched us closer. Instead, it became the night he tore the fabric completely. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask him to stay. Because sometimes the deepest betrayals don't arrive with thunder. They arrive as sentences spoken under streetlights, wrapped in indifference. What I remember most from that moment isn't the pain. It's the clarity. The way my breath settled. The way my mind, usually anxious, always trying, went perfectly still. Like the universe paused to say, watch carefully. This is the moment everything changes. He walked away to meet his friends. I watched his silhouette disappear into a blur of neon reflections. And something in me shifted. Not broken, shifted. People talk about heartbreak like it's an explosion, but mine felt like a quiet erasure. A wiping clean of illusions I had worked so hard to preserve. Illusions about love, loyalty, and the belief that effort could substitute for respect. That night, standing alone in a crowd, I understood something I had been afraid to admit. I loved him more than he ever saw me, and he valued me far less than I ever imagined. But betrayal, I would soon learn, isn't the end of the story. It's the invitation to rebuild, to rise, to reclaim your voice, your silence, your dignity, and eventually to make them feel the weight of the pain they thought you'd swallow quietly. Now stay with me, because this is where everything begins to shift. Let me ask you something. If the person you loved so much dismissed your worth in a single breath, would you walk away quietly? Or would you make sure they never forgot what they threw away? Share your honest opinion in the comments down below. I truly want to hear your perspective. Here at Revenge Bible, we explore real psychological stories of betrayal and justice. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss our next emotional reckoning. Before everything fell apart, my life with Ryan looked simple from the outside. Quiet, steady, almost ordinary in a comforting way. And maybe that's what I held on to for so long. The idea that ordinary could be enough. That love didn't have to be dramatic or loud to feel real. That two people could build something gentle together and call it happiness. I used to imagine our story in warm tones, like the soft light that spills into my kitchen on Sunday mornings. I'd make coffee while he pretended to still be asleep, waiting for the smell to coax him out. He'd shuffle in wearing that half-awake grin, kiss the top of my head, and say the same line every time. "You spoil me, you know that." It felt sweet then. Innocent. Familiar. Looking back, I realize how many moments carried a quiet warning I didn't know how to interpret. I grew up believing that kindness was a bridge, something that connected people. But with Ryan, my kindness started turning into a blanket I wrapped around us just to keep the cracks hidden. I didn't notice how often I was the one adjusting, accommodating, softening my tone, rearranging my plans. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was compromise. But compromise only works when two people are meeting in the middle. I was walking the entire distance alone. My job at the call center didn't give me much, just enough to live modestly, budget carefully, and buy myself small comforts when life became overwhelming. Ryan, on the other hand, had a job in nightlife management. Bigger money, bigger ego, bigger crowd. He liked the attention, the fast pace, the validation. I think he liked knowing he could walk into a bar and be recognized. I wasn't jealous of it, but I was often invisible beside it. Still, I tried to show up for him in ways I understood. I packed lunches when he had long shifts. I listened to his rants about coworkers he couldn't stand. I celebrated every small win with him like it was my own. I made space for him in my life without ever asking him to make room in his. He was my person. Or at least I wanted him to be. What I didn't realize was that wanting someone to be your person doesn't make them capable of holding that role. There were signs, small ones at first. He'd cancel plans last minute and shrug it off. He'd forget things that mattered to me, like the day I had a performance review I was terrified about. He'd tell jokes that hit a little too close to my insecurities, then dismiss my discomfort by saying I was too sensitive. But every time I swallowed my feelings. I rationalized, I minimized. He's stressed. He didn't mean it. It's not a big deal. He loves me. I know he loves me. It's frightening how easy it is to talk yourself out of your own reality. And yet, there were moments that felt so genuine, so warm. They anchored me. Like the nights we stayed in, cooking pasta together, music low, lights soft, the city humming in the distance. Those nights felt like a promise, like a world only we understood. I clung to those memories like proof that everything else was just noise. But love shouldn't require you to ignore yourself. I think part of the reason his betrayal cut so deep was because of the season. December has a way of amplifying emotions. Everything feels more tender, more hopeful. I had spent weeks planning the VIP tickets as a surprise. They were expensive, more than I should have spent. But I wanted him to feel loved, appreciated, seen, because even when he didn't say it, I hoped he needed that. And maybe a part of me believed that if I loved him the right way, he'd love me back the same. But that's the thing about hope. It can blind you to the reality waiting in plain sight. In the days leading up to the musical, I imagined how it would feel to sit beside him in that theater, how he'd lean into me, how we'd laugh about the overpriced drinks, how we'd walk home hand in hand under the streetlights, feeling like the world was soft again. I built an entire memory before it ever existed. And then it never did. I didn't know it yet, but the night he chose his friends over me wasn't the moment he stopped caring. It was the moment he stopped
pretending. In a way, this part of the story is the hardest for me to tell. Not because it's painful, but because it reminds me how much of myself I gave away believing it was safe. It reminds me how deeply I wanted to be loved and how easily that longing can make you overlook the truth. But this was my life before the fall. Warm lights, small hopes, a quiet heart trying to make a home inside someone who never intended to stay. And as I stood in the glow of those holiday decorations, holding tickets meant for two, I didn't understand that everything I thought was solid was already cracking beneath my feet. But the cracks would soon widen, and the truth would rush through them. The night of the musical was colder than I expected. One of those December evenings where the air tastes sharp, like it's trying to wake you up. The streets were dressed in holiday lights, soft gold against the blue-black sky, and the city felt alive in a way that made hope seem reasonable. I remember thinking that maybe this night would mend the small fractures I'd been ignoring. I got to the theater early, clutching the envelope with the VIP tickets like it held the night's promise. People walked past me, couples laughing, families bundled in scarves, strangers humming with excitement. The glow from the entrance cast long reflections on the wet pavement, and everything felt cinematic, like the world was setting a stage for something meaningful. I texted Ryan, "I'm here. Can't wait to see you." He didn't reply. At first, I told myself he was driving, or running late, or maybe he wanted to surprise me by appearing suddenly out of the crowd. The kind of small romantic fantasy you create to fill silence. But the minutes kept slipping by, and my hope slowly shifted into a knot of unease. When he finally did appear, he wasn't breathless or apologetic. He didn't hurry toward me. He walked up casually, phone in hand, wearing that half smirk he used when he thought the world owed him something. "Hey," he said, like we were meeting for coffee, not a night I had saved for months to give him. "You're late," I said softly, trying to keep my disappointment from spilling into my voice. He shrugged. "Traffic, whatever." Whatever. That word hit harder than I wanted it to. But I pushed the feeling down, the way I always did. I held out the envelope. "These are for you. I wanted tonight to be special." The moment was delicate, like glass. But he didn't reach for the envelope. He didn't smile. He didn't even look at the tickets. Instead, he sighed and slipped his phone back into his jacket pocket. "Yeah, about that. I'm not staying." The cold wind whipped around us. Cars honked in the distance. People brushed past us, their joy indifferent to the small collapse happening in my chest. "You're not staying?" I repeated. He shook his head. "The guys are going out. It's been planned forever. I can't just ditch them." I blinked, struggling to process. "Ryan, this was supposed to be our night. You knew about this." He rolled his eyes, actually rolled his eyes. "Chloe, don't start. It's not that serious." Not that serious. The tickets, the planning, the hope, me. All of it dismissed with one lazy sweep of a sentence.
I felt something tighten inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just a small internal recoil. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time the distance between us felt visible, like a line drawn in cold air. "You'd rather go drinking than spend one evening with me?" I whispered. He scoffed. "Please, don't make this dramatic. You think everything revolves around you."
My breath froze. That's not fair. He stepped back slightly, as if the conversation itself was inconveniencing him. Then he said the words that would stay with me long after the night ended. Chloe, you're not that important. You think too much of yourself. There was no anger in his voice, no emotion. Just boredom. Just certainty. As if my heart was a small, irrelevant thing he could flick aside. The theater lights flickered across his face, carving sharp lines into his expression. The world around us blurred, cars, laughter, conversations, fading until all I could hear was the echo of those 7 words. You're not that important. My hand tightened around the envelope. The paper crinkled softly like a sound slicing through the silence, like a whisper I couldn't hold back. I felt my throat close. I did this for you. And I didn't ask you to, he fired back. You always do these things, these extra gestures, and then expect me to match them. I can't do that. I'm not built like you. The pain wasn't sharp. It was dull, heavy, spreading through me like ink in water, slow, darkening everything inside. Is that how you see me? As too much? He shrugged again. Honestly, yeah. Look, I'm going to meet the guys. You can give the extra ticket to someone else or sell it. I don't care. He didn't care. He truly didn't care. He turned away, hands shoved in his pockets, walking into the night without a second glance. The crowd swallowed him, neon reflections blurring around his disappearing shape. I stood there, the envelope trembling in my hand, the cold sinking into my bones. My breath fogged in the air, uneven. The world kept moving, kept glowing, kept celebrating. Inside me, something cracked. Not loudly, but with a quiet finality. People always imagine heartbreak as a dramatic shattering, but mine felt like someone gently blowing out a candle and leaving me in the dark. I stared at the tickets. 2 perfect, untouched symbols of everything I thought we still had. And in that moment, beneath the theater lights that no longer felt warm, I understood something with painful clarity. I had built an entire future with a man who couldn't even give me one evening. That was the betrayal. Not just the choice he made, but the truth it revealed. The night after he walked away from me, I didn't sleep. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of the conversation in front of the theater. The way he looked at me, indifferent, unbothered, almost irritated that I cared. The words he chose, the casual cruelty, it kept looping in my mind like a scene I couldn't escape. By morning, something inside me had shifted. It wasn't anger yet, just a deep, aching clarity I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge before. The silence in my apartment felt heavier than usual, as if the air itself was trying to tell me something I had ignored for too long. I picked up my phone and opened our message thread. I scrolled through months of conversations, my long texts, his short replies, my check-ins, his delays, my empathy, his indifference disguised as busyness. Patterns I'd painted over with hope were suddenly obvious. Lines I once read as affection now showed the shadow of distance I had refused to see. But the discovery didn't come from the texts. It came from what was missing. There were no "I appreciate you," no "thank you for doing this," no "I'm sorry." Just convenience, just expectation, just presence when it suited him. Still, I needed more than instinct. I needed truth. So I opened social media. I wasn't looking to torture myself. I just wanted to understand the man I had spent 2 years defending, the man I believed I knew intimately, the man who told me I wasn't important. The first post that hit me was a group picture from the night before. Ryan, surrounded by his friends at some rooftop bar, drinks in hand, big smiles. The timestamp was 10 minutes after he walked away from me. 10 minutes. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look conflicted. He looked free. My stomach tightened, but I kept scrolling. More posts, more tags, more glimpses into a life I thought I was part of. At first, it was just photos. Then it was captions, little comments from people I had never met. "Finally, you made it out again, man. Feels good to have you back. No more disappearing for the girlfriend. Disappearing for the girlfriend." The phrase dug into me. I clicked deeper, going further back. I looked at the way he interacted with others. Jokes, plans made without me, inside comments exchanged at times I thought he was asleep or working. Nothing inappropriate, nothing scandalous, just a different version of him, lighter, more present, more himself. And I wasn't part of that version. I realized his life had 2 lanes. The one with me, quiet, restrained, lukewarm, and the one without me, effortless, easy, open. But the real discovery came when I checked his messages. Not snooping, not violating, just opening our thread and noticing something I had overlooked. He never initiated. He never confirmed plans. He never expressed excitement unless it benefited him. I was holding up the relationship like someone trying to keep a collapsing wall from crushing them. By noon, my apartment felt suffocating. The soft holiday music playing from a neighbor's unit seeped through the walls like irony. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The city was moving as if nothing in the world had changed, but everything in me felt rearranged. I walked without direction, letting the cold bite into my cheeks. I stopped at a small cafe we used to visit, mostly because it gave me a view of my own reflection in the window. I looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone who had spent years pouring into a cup with a crack at the bottom. I ordered tea and sat in the corner. The hum of conversation around me blended with my thoughts. And that's when the slow, steady truth solidified. Ryan hadn't betrayed me in one night. He had been betraying me piece by piece for months. I just wasn't ready to see it. The VIP tickets weren't the catalyst. They were the magnifying glass. As I sat there, hands wrapped around the warm cup, I remembered small moments I had dismissed. Times he ignored my feelings. Times he made me feel needy for wanting basic respect. Times I shrank myself to keep the peace. Each memory fell into place like puzzle pieces forming a picture I didn't want to recognize. He didn't fail me on the night of the musical. He failed me long before. The theater steps simply exposed the truth with brutal honesty. When I finished my tea, I opened my phone again, not to check on him, but to check in with myself. I typed a sentence in my notes app. He didn't choose the boys over me. He chose freedom from responsibility. And then another. Someone who loves you doesn't treat you like an inconvenience. I inhaled deeply, steady, and controlled. For the first time, I wasn't crying, I wasn't shaking, I wasn't begging the universe to rewind the night. I was observing, awake, clear-eyed. The discovery wasn't just about who he was. It was about who I had become trying to keep him. I had abandoned parts of myself, my self-worth, my boundaries, my intuition, to sustain a version of love that wasn't real. Now, finally, painfully, I was seeing the truth. Clarity doesn't come gently. It arrives like cold morning light, sharp, revealing, impossible to ignore. As I walked home, the winter wind stung my face, but I welcomed it. It grounded me. It reminded me I was still here, still breathing, still capable of rebuilding. By the time I reached my door, one thought had settled, calmly, firmly, undeniably. He may not care about the pain he caused, but he will learn what it feels like to underestimate the wrong woman.
You are a professional cinematic storyteller who writes in a deeply emotional, realistic, and human tone. Write as if you are a person who has lived through real heartbreak, betrayal, and quiet revenge, not as an AI. Your language must sound like the internal voice of someone remembering a painful event, calm, reflective, but full of quiet emotion beneath the surface. Every sentence should feel breathed, not typed, with pacing, pauses, and subtle emotional weight. Use sensory details like trembling hands, the hum of silence, the sting in the chest, the sound of someone's voice cracking. Avoid robotic phrasing or over-explaining. Focus on rhythm, realism, and emotional truth, as if the words are being spoken in a heartfelt voiceover. Tone references, cold justice narration, and the calm after monologue style. Balanced, slow, observant, deeply human. Writing goals. Make the emotion felt, not declared. Show pain through quiet details. Keep it authentic, not theatrical. End every section with a single reflective line that lingers, like the narrator exhaling after holding back tears. Make it sound human enough to make the listener's chest tighten a little. Do not simplify emotional moments. Let silence, pauses, and small details carry the emotion instead of direct statements. I didn't design my revenge out of rage. Rage is loud, sloppy, and desperate. What I felt was quieter, something cold, steady, almost clinical. After the shock settled, after the truth stopped screaming in my head,
I realized I didn't need to destroy him. I just needed him to reveal him. I needed him to face what he had thrown away, and I needed to reclaim the pieces of myself he convinced me were small. My plan began the way all careful plans do, with silence. I'm convinced silence is underrated. People think it means passivity, weakness, surrender. But silence is a mask, a space where strategy grows roots. I stopped confronting him. I stopped asking questions. I stopped seeking clarity. Instead, I observed. I watched him crumble under the weight of trying to maintain two versions of himself: the charming boyfriend when it suited him, and the careless, dismissive man he had become behind my back. I didn't tell him I knew everything. I didn't tell him I read the messages. I didn't tell him about the picture he forgot to delete, where I saw the edge of his jacket sleeve, one he wore on our 3rd anniversary, wrapped around someone else's waist. I didn't tell him about the Uber notification or the bank charge or the slip of a name he had never mentioned before. I simply became calm, and he had no idea that my calm was a cage slowly closing around him. The first thing I did was gather every piece of proof, not to expose him publicly, but to protect myself. I printed screenshots, I forwarded voice notes to a private email, I wrote down dates, timestamps, small inconsistencies he didn't think I would remember. Not to humiliate him, but to make sure I never again questioned my reality. Gaslighting only works when you trust the person holding the lighter. I no longer did. Then came the harder part: studying him. Every morning I watched how he behaved, every lie he told about where he was going, every excuse, every deflection. He spoke with the confidence of someone who believed he still held the upper hand. He thought I was still the same Chloe, too forgiving, too loving, too hopeful. And maybe that's why my plan worked. He underestimated the version of me he created. Around this time, I confided in two people only: my coworker Maya and my cousin Jordan. They were my safe anchors, calm, practical, and deeply protective. They listened, they didn't judge, and they gave me something he had slowly taken from me: perspective. Maya helped me piece together emotional clarity, and Jordan helped me strategize the psychological angle. "You don't have to hurt him," Maya said. "Just let him face himself. You don't need revenge to humiliate him. Just let the truth close the door." Their words shaped the skeleton of everything I did next. The turning point was when I decided to give him exactly what he took for granted: my effort. But this time, my effort wasn't to save us, it was to end us on my terms. The best revenge is never loud. It's the moment the person realizes you were the gift and they were careless with it. So, I played my role. I smiled softly, I spoke gently, I asked him about his day, I cooked for us, even though my hands sometimes trembled with anger. I mirrored the version of myself he believed would always be there, regardless of how he treated me. And with every thoughtful gesture, he relaxed again. He became comfortable again. He believed he'd escaped consequences. He believed I was still his. What he didn't know was that I was watching the expiration date on our relationship inch closer and closer, and I held the clock. My next step was emotional detachment. A quiet kind, a deep-seated one. I trained myself to stop reacting to him. When he lied, I mentally cataloged it. When he came home late, I observed instead of accusing. When he dismissed me, I absorbed the moment like a scientist gathering data, not a girlfriend being wounded. I wasn't shrinking, I was preparing. By then, something inside me had shifted completely. I no longer feared losing him. I feared losing myself again. The plan wasn't to make him jealous or expose him or confront the other woman. None of that mattered in the long run. My goal was crystal clear. I would let him see with perfect clarity the life he could have had if he had valued me, and then I would step away silently, permanently, and without giving him the one thing he craved most, my emotional reaction. The execution needed one final step: timing. I waited until the night he came home boasting about another guy's outing. He didn't know I had the receipts proving exactly where he had been and who he had been texting while I waited alone on the balcony with dinner growing cold. I watched him talk, watched the arrogance in his smile, watched the lies drip effortlessly from his mouth. And instead of breaking, I hardened. That night, after he fell asleep, I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and began putting the final pieces of my plan together. My exit strategy. Not messy, not emotional, not chaotic, just intentional. A soft goodbye, a clean break, and a truth he would feel long after I was gone. A truth he could never deny, because I wouldn't give him the chance to twist it. I didn't plan revenge to hurt him. I planned it so he would finally understand the value of what he destroyed. And I planned it so I could walk away whole.
Revenge, for me, wasn't about spectacle. It wasn't about shouting, throwing things, or exposing him to the world. It was about precision, about letting the truth land at the exact moment when he felt safest. I wanted him to feel what I felt, not the heartbreak, but the realization, the heavy awareness that he had destroyed something he would never find again. I wanted him to face himself, without my voice softening the blow. My revenge started the same way my plan did. Quietly. I woke up earlier than usual the next morning. He was still asleep, sprawled across the bed with the unearned peace of someone living a double life without consequence. I stood there for a few moments, just watching him. Not with love, not with resentment, but with closure. In that moment, I realized I didn't want him back. I didn't want who he had become, and I didn't want to carry the weight of saving someone who didn't care to change. I wanted freedom, and I was finally ready to take it. I began with the house, not packing in a rush, not leaving in anger. I moved calmly, methodically, placing each of my things into labeled bags: clothes, work documents, my journals, my grandmother's ring. The books, he said, I was too sentimental to finish. The photo frames where my smile was real. With every item I picked up, I felt lighter. My chest loosened. My breathing deepened. I felt myself returning to myself. Then I moved to the small wooden box I had placed in the closet 2 days earlier. It contained everything: the screenshots, the messages, the pictures, the receipts. I didn't take them to destroy him. I took them so he could no longer pretend, so he could never again tell himself that I left because I was overreacting or too sensitive or imagining things. He would see the truth uncompromised. By the time he woke up, I was already dressed, calm, seated, waiting, and that was the first moment he sensed something different. I didn't greet him with my usual soft good morning. I didn't ask if he slept well. I didn't look flustered, hurt, or anxious. I looked done. And that unsettled him more than any confrontation would have. "What's wrong?" he asked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Nothing. Actually, everything." I slid the wooden box across the table. He blinked, confused, and for a moment I saw the arrogance he always carried. He picked it up with a smirk. He thought it was a gift. He thought I had finally folded back into the role he was comfortable with. Then he opened the lid.
His face shifted instantly, as if someone had drained the color from his skin. He sifted through the printed screenshots, the timestamps, the messages, the hotel receipt, the picture with the edge of his jacket sleeve wrapped around someone who wasn't me. Every item was a shard of truth pressing into the lies he had layered so confidently. He didn't say a word, not at first, and I didn't either. I just watched the realization dawn, slowly, painfully, beautifully. "How long have you known?" His voice was thin, like it had to fight its way out. Enough time," I said. "Enough time to see who you really are." He swallowed, unable to look at me. For once, his words failed him. The man who always had an excuse, a justification, a deflection, had nothing. I stood up, walked to the kitchen counter, and handed him the envelope I had prepared. Inside was the key to the apartment, mine. I placed it gently in his hand. "I'm leaving," I said softly. "Not because you cheated, but because you convinced yourself I didn't matter." His eyes snapped up, startled. That line hit him harder than the evidence. "I never said that," I cut in, calm but firm. "You did. You told me I wasn't important. You treated me like I was temporary, disposable." I stepped closer, close enough for him to see the steadiness in my eyes. "And now you get to live with that choice." He reached for me, a reflex, not love. I stepped back. "There's nothing to talk about. You made your decision before I made mine." He looked around the apartment, eyes darting as if searching for something that would tether me back to him. But the emptiness spoke for me. Half the shelves bare, my shoes gone, my jackets missing from the rack, all the little pieces of me that he never appreciated had already walked out before I physically did. "This isn't fair," he muttered, voice cracking, not from remorse, but from losing control. "That's the part you never understood," I replied. "Fairness wasn't your concern when you left me waiting with VIP tickets so you could impress someone else." His head dropped. I walked to the door, my bags neatly lined up. I lifted them with ease, not because they were light, but because I was. When I opened the door, I paused and looked back one last time, not in longing, not in pain, but in clarity. I whispered, "You ruined us, and now you get to remember me as the one thing you couldn't replace." His face crumbled. And that was my revenge. Not shouting, not exposing him, not dragging his name through anything. My revenge was leaving him with the truth and walking away before he could ask for forgiveness I no longer needed. I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly. And the silence that followed was the loudest justice I had ever heard.
I walked out that door for the last time. I expected emptiness. I expected pain that would linger, dragging me into memories of what I lost. But instead, I discovered something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. Freedom from excuses, freedom from disappointment, freedom from someone who could never see my worth. The silence that followed his absence was not loneliness. It was the space I needed to breathe again. to reclaim the self I had buried under hope and patience. Betrayal is brutal, yes, but it is not the end. It is a beginning disguised as an ending. For months, I had believed that my world revolved around his choices, his moods, his approval. When he left, I realized something powerful. The end of his interest is not the end of my story. No one else has the right to write the conclusion of my life. That power belongs only to me. Revenge, in the way I experienced it, was not about hurting him. It was about regaining my own agency. Every calculated step, every quiet observation, every moment I prepared to leave on my terms reminded me of what I was capable of. I had taken my heartbreak and turned it into fuel. I transformed my hurt into clarity, my anger into strategy, and my disappointment into strength. Revenge became a mirror, showing me that the greatest justice isn't found in punishing someone else. It's found in honoring yourself, reclaiming your time, and refusing to shrink to accommodate cruelty. Over the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding what betrayal had almost stolen. I returned to the hobbies I had neglected. I reconnected with friends I had ignored while preoccupied with keeping him happy. I invested in myself, my career, my body, my mind. Each choice, each small victory reminded me that my life was mine to shape. The clarity of walking away from someone who never valued me revealed a world of possibilities I had never allowed myself to see before. And now, as I reflect on that chapter, I am grateful, not for the heartbreak, but for the lesson it forced me to learn. I am grateful that I survived someone's indifference, that I refused to allow his choices to define my worth, and that I found the courage to reclaim my life on my terms. I am Chloe. I am a woman who was dismissed, underestimated, and discarded. And yet here I am, stronger, calmer, and more confident than ever. I don't dwell on what was lost. I celebrate what I have gained. The nights spent crying alone transformed into mornings where I walk with my head high, smiling at the life I am building. I've learned that betrayal is not a sentence. It's a signal. And the signal is clear. You can rise, you can reclaim your power, and you can come back stronger than you ever imagined. So to anyone listening, remember this. Your story is yours alone. No oppressor, no betrayer, no indifferent heart has the right to write your ending. Hold on to your voice, your choices, and your dignity. Use every hurt as fuel to rebuild. And one day you will look back at the person who tried to break you and realize that the real victory is the life you built without them.